All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers who live in the New York City area, you'll know that the rise in gun violence has been a major narrative, especially over the course of the past 4 months or so, maybe 5 months, since the coronavirus epidemic or pandemic has started to propagate across the United States, in conjunction with a lot of the racially tinged storylines that have helped to foster a lot of the frustration, both racially and economically, in the populace of the United States. Well, that has caused a drastic rise in gun violence, especially in cities and states that are governed by the Marxist Party of the United States, known as the Democrats. In most of these quote-unquote black communities or black and brown communities, the people have not been trained to rule themselves because they don't have a ruling class mentality. That's number one. Number two, in most of those communities, the people do not even conceive of the concept of ownership. See, ownership does a powerful thing for you. It actually helps to foster accountability and responsibility, because you have to maintain something that you have, that you own. That's why property rights are so important, and that's why normally they're connected to upstanding communities, which you'll normally find in communities that have a preponderance of drug use, depression, gun violence, is a lack of ownership. Lack of ownership normally has a correlation to a lack of accountability. People are so accustomed to not having anything, they don't respect other people's property or what other people have on them. They don't even respect other people's lives. So that's why we're seeing this drastic rise in gun violence. It's not just because of the events of this year. It's also because of the frustration in the people and not being instructed on how to have value in yourself. You have value in yourself when you can govern yourself. In order to govern yourself, you have to go by a series of concepts, precepts, statutes, commandments. And because our people are pretty lawless, we have no cultural mores. We just don't. When you call yourself pro-black, what does that even really mean? That does not denote culture, lineage, language, history. It denotes nothing. I mean, honestly, when you say that something is black, what you're really saying is that it's obscure, right? If you said it was a black day today, what you're saying is that it was overcast. So the term black is not really something that's conducive to success when you embrace it, whether you understand it or not. I've stated this in other videos. Even so-called white people do not call themselves that unless they're low-level so-called whites or so-called Caucasians who've embraced a lot of the race narratives. Most successful so-called white people call themselves according to their nationality. I'm Italian, I'm Yugoslavian, I'm Romanian, I'm Estonian, I'm Latvian, I'm British, I'm German, etc. So we cannot separate the essential connection between ethnicity, nationality, history, and productivity. That takes away the yearning to want to hurt other people because you're more concerned about maintaining your standing amongst your community. Your community has to have a very strong sense of values. You can only have values when you have laws. So our people are relatively lawless because we have no understanding of our history. These are major reasons why you have the gun violence problem amongst so-called black men. We have no understanding of who we were, so we have no understanding of where we need to go. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
The number of shootings in New York City continues to go up, and now we've learned that the total so far this year has surpassed the number of shootings in all of last year, and we still have 5 months to go. CBS 2's Hazel Sanchez spoke with some New Yorkers who are desperate for solutions to end the gun violence.
Well, the real problem is that the people are desperate for solutions that they're going to agree with. But most solutions to serious problems take serious hard work and a serious investment. And most people are not willing to do that. It's mostly just lip service. You know, everyone's going to have to put their brick in when it comes to real solutions for a community issue. And it means that we're going to have to take a hard look at a lot of things. Right now, the race conversation is a bailout. Oh, we're going to force the white man to have a conversation with us because 400 years of slavery has done this, and that. There's never going to be a magical, mystical conversation where white people agree with so-called black people about what needs to be done, other than with Caucasian liberals. Caucasian liberals will talk to you, they'll work with you based on the condition that you accept their other ideologies, that being Not only the acceptance, but the endorsement of homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgenderism. You understand that, so-called black man? That's why the liberal Caucasian is willing to act as if they care about your plight, because they need you as a foot soldier. The exchange for their alleged conversation and, their supposed agreement to assist us in alleviating our condition is that you'll go back and either teach your children or allow your children to be taught that it's actually preferable for you to be a homosexual, a lesbian, or transgender. That's how that works. It's always this for that. It's always quid pro quo. Nobody's going to do something for you and not expect anything in return. If you come across a person like that, count yourself extremely, extremely, extremely blessed. 99.99999% of people are going to want something from you in exchange for something else.
Sunday afternoon, police collected evidence from a drive-by shooting on Longfellow Avenue in the South Bronx. A 27-year-old man was shot in the...
Yeah, Longfellow Avenue. Them niggas don't play. That's shata.
A few hours earlier, in the Weeksville section of Brooklyn, a bullet grazes the head of a 16-year-old boy. While both survived, the escalation of gun violence across New York City is unsettling for many. Look
at all these female cops. All these female cops. 2 female cops here. What they're really saying is that they don't take policing seriously anymore. They're just going to throw a whole bunch of female cops out there. 2 female cops here, just all over the fucking place.
Is unsettling for many, like David Harden, who called it home.
It's very disturbing. If somebody crosses them wrong, let's say you bumped them by accident, they're going to pull it out and shoot you because they can.
Right, but is it just because they can? Why is it that this so-called black man has such a disregard for the life of another so-called black man? Now, we know the curses that a man's going to look at his brother and have evil within his eye. We know that. But if we're just going to evaluate it from a 2-dimensional perspective, number one, the older generation, no disrespect to this brother, his generation of so-called black men failed their children. They failed to instruct them with information and right and exact knowledge that could attack and address exactly what the phenomenon is. The phenomenon is a dearth of spiritual understanding of who the so-called black man actually is. As long as you call yourself black, you're never going to respect yourself or your brother because you're not bound by any laws. You're not bound by any cultural laws. Therefore, you're not bound by any ramifications. Right? You're just not. And beyond that, to be quite honest with you, a lot of niggas don't have any home training. You could bump into somebody in the middle of the street and alleviate the possible potential for a problem by turning around and saying, brother, my bad, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Things like that seem to be very difficult for the so-called black man to let come out of his mouth, particularly in certain environments that we might call the hood. It's difficult for cats to apologize to the next man, unfortunately. Cats are so defensive because of the machismo or the defensiveness that they've learned from their youth, especially once they hit puberty. Things change when young boys reach that age, 12, 13, hormones change. And then at that same time, their circle of friends changes because they're going from junior high school to high school. So now you're meeting a whole different group of people and you're not approaching them or being approached by them with that sense of comfort. Because those kids that you knew from the age of 6 to 13, you literally grew up with them. Like you saw them turn from small children into adolescents, just like you did. You go to high school, you're 14 years old, you don't know this dude. You might have seen him around your way or around the block, but you might not know him per se. So now you're approaching him from scratch. And both of you are trying to create this new character for yourself in high school. Maybe you were a nerdy kid in the 4th or 5th grade and you don't want to have that persona anymore. So now to fit in with the group or with the clique, you're going to act tough. You're going to act rough. You're going to act like you're a so-called thug. So many so-called young black men end up dead or in prison because of the act that they decide to partake in or take unto themselves. And once again, it's because there's a lack of culture in the so-called black community. Literally, most so-called black men don't even know what to teach their sons outside of what the school system is teaching them, and outside of the fear-mongering tactics that our people have been trained to believe they should be teaching their children. Or be scared of the cops, or, you're going to be held down in this society. And don't get it twisted. There's a certain level of that's true. That the so-called black man is not going to be privy to the same opportunities that other races might, because they're the ones who set up the infrastructure and they're the ones who have a stronger culture than us. But that means that we have to attack things from an earlier age with a greater sense of a ruling class mentality. Meaning what? We have to stop teaching our young black boys to get jobs. They have to start being encouraged to learn a craft or to start a business. You can't look at your 8-year-old son and say, son, I want you to get an education so that you get a good job. It has to be, son, I want you to become informed so that you can run a business, so that you can enter into investing or real estate or finance. Things that you don't have to depend upon others, because your level of knowledge is going to be so elite that people are going to have to depend upon you. I've said this in other videos. There's no reason why children should be going to high school and learning trigonometry and calculus unless you're going to become a mathematician. Children should be learning about finance and investing at that age so that they can become productive citizens. So there's a lot going on in this society that has to be alleviated, or at least assessed. But the main thing is the so-called black man, we have to return back to making sure that there's a framework of laws and repercussions. But that's not going to happen, honestly, until there's a great traumatic event that occurs in this society that's going to shock the so-called black man into letting go of a lot of the pretense and the nonsense that he adheres to, the fake wokeness that has to go. But just getting back to the point, the scriptures tell you a soft answer turneth away wrath. There's a lot that you can move past and move beyond if you just humble yourself. Somebody steps on your foot, somebody bumps into you by mistake, they're supposed to apologize. And sometimes, if you see somebody bumped into you or stepped on your foot and they're just going about their day, they just don't acknowledge what they did, sometimes you have to let certain things slide, because the Most High will get that person if they want to carry on in that cavalier way. Particularly if you're never going to see that person again. I mean, brothers, there are bigger things, there are bigger fish to fry. There's some stupid nigga stepping on your foot, and maybe he did it because he saw you had a nice pair of shoes on and he wants to be an asshole because he's mad that he knows his life is going nowhere. Don't let people derail you from where you're supposed to be in life. There are bigger fish to fry in this life, man.
Do you feel safe on the streets, Matt?
No, that's why I stay in the house.
Well, you need to stay in the damn house. Out in the street with a goddamn stocking cap on. You need to stay in the damn house.
The number of shootings in the 5 boroughs this year to date has now surpassed the total number of shootings in all.
This is such a damn joke. Got 2 women out there with skin-tight police slacks on trying to show off their ass. But supposedly they're there to enforce policy.
2019. Last year, there were 776 total shootings with 922 victims. Over the weekend, the total...
Damn, 776 shootings with 922 victims. So those some magic bullets right there. Them bullets was going through people, hitting other people. Whew.
That with at least 942 victims, including innocent children like 17-year-old Bronx basketball star Brandon Hendricks, killed by a stray bullet in June, and 1-year-old Devell Gardner shot dead in his stroller last month. Many struggle to make sense of this shooting spike.
Let me also say this. There are kill squads amongst many of these police departments that are going out there and just shooting black people standing out on the street because they're upset about some of the reforms that are being pushed on the police department. So they drive down the street with their tinted windows and try to act like it's some gang-related bullshit. And they're shooting mothers pushing strollers and all this other stuff. So that also has to be stated. And of course, when we look at the stats and it's 776 shootings and 922 quote-unquote victims, it's obvious, even though I made a joke about the magic bullet, it's obvious that it's one person who's shooting multiple people and they count that as one shooting.
Maybe it's part of the pandemic. Maybe it's a part of homelessness. Maybe it's part of aggravation, jobless.
Maybe it's a part of the promotion of chaos by the Democratic Party. Maybe it's a part of that. Brothers, I touched on this already. When they say we want to take down the patriarchy, they mean they want to destroy order. They want to destroy order. Remember, their God is the Joker. That's why they came out with that film last year. What did the Joker do? The Joker provided an image of himself to become an idol for the disenfranchised, for the downtrodden. You understand that? So that kind of is what George Floyd and that ritualistic removal has done. And I'll be delving into that a bit more as I continue that series, that George Floyd represented the divine bull who was sacrificed by Derek Chauvin. That was a ritual that occurred.
Frustration and anger.
There were more than 37 shootings in the city over the July 4th weekend, including this one on Sheffield Avenue in Brooklyn, where a 21-year-old man was shot. The gunman here, in newly released surveillance photos, is still at large. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, a former NYPD captain, said
this guy represents everything that's wrong with so-called black leadership. This guy has no plan for anything. He's just a super liberal, woke Negro who talks about everything but says nothing at all.
Many factors have led to the increase in gun violence, including the dismantling of the NYPD's anti-crime unit, the strained relationship with police and the...
Right, but what's the reason why the NYPD anti-crime unit was disbanded? It was disbanded because the Marxists, known as the Democrats, wanted to defund the police. They wanted to act as if removing certain factions within the police force was going to make low-level thinking black communities feel less criminalized. The fact of the matter is that there's a criminal culture in certain substrata of the so-called black community. And what needs to be attacked is the mindset. And you're not going to be able to change the mindset of certain substrata within particular communities, to be quite honest with you, without wrecking shop. A lot of these niggas got to go.
And an issue with the number of handguns on the street. He'd like to see the creation of a tri-state gun task force.
We need to do more at our bus terminals to do spot checks of bags that are coming in. We need to do more at even some of our bridges. People are bringing guns in.
You're not going to stop guns from coming into any of these cities. You're just not. These dudes will start creating compartments within their vehicles to smuggle guns into certain cities where there's a demand for them. Illegal guns, by the way. So if you want to stop people from having illegal guns, you have to incentivize them to live a productive, constructive, legal life. That means that you have to empower them with information and knowledge in their youth that will give them a way to make good money without having to become a criminal or settling into the gang life. Beyond that, they have to grow up in more constructive homes, and that means less female-dominated households. People never want to address that component of why the so-called black community is so fucked up, because they're so busy trying to lionize the damn so-called black woman. There are 4 protected demographics in this society, that being women, homosexuals, lesbians, and transgenders. You cannot say anything about those 4 demographics, and that's a major problem, particularly when it comes to crime, because the woman is an agent of chaos by nature. If she's allowed to lead the vast majority of households in any so-called community, you're going to see the results. You're going to see the impact. It's going to be skyrocketing fucking crime, period.
District Attorney Eric Gonzalez agrees and says the community and police need to come together to hold the shooters accountable.
We know that there are people in the community who know who's committing the violence.
When a bullet leaves the barrel of a gun, it does not discriminate if it's going to hit a police officer in a blue uniform or an everyday young person in blue jeans. We need to come together. We need each other.
These niggas are always saying the same shit. We need to come together. No. We need to make sure that the so-called black man is empowered to make the correct decisions and who to procreate with and when to procreate. And that's to start from there. You have to build a house or a building or a cottage, no matter how big the abode is, from the foundation. These niggas are trying to address the rooftop. Or we have to come together. By the time you coming together, little kids are dead, niggas are locked up, people are disenfranchised, women are losing their minds. We have to address it from the root, because any solution is going to start with future generations, not ours. And that's another problem. A lot of our people are not magnanimous enough to grasp that the solution might not involve us. at least in seeing the fruits of our strategies. You know, we have to love our people enough to say, we're going to develop plans and devise certain strategies where we're not even going to be able to reap the fruit of what we developed. But because we love our children and our grandchildren, we know it's going to work. Everyone talks about the quote unquote Illuminati. They developed a lot of these plans 400-500 years ago. You know what I'm saying? The Rothschilds go back to, you know, the damn early to mid 1700s. And they still have their progeny involved in a lot of the same agendas to this day. So once again, our people, we don't operate on that level. We operate as pawns. We don't operate as dominators on the chessboard. That's why we don't get respect. And then as a pawn, when you look at the king or the queen, always begging for validation, whatever you represent on the chessboard is not going to change. The whole chessboard has to be shaken up, all the pieces removed, and then recast. But if you're already on that board, you're not going to be able to change from a pawn to a king, at least as a community. As an individual, yes. But as a community, no.
To make sure this city is safe.
Police are
At least not without divine intervention.
looking for the gunman in both Sunday shootings. The victims are expected to make a full recovery. In the South Bronx, Hazel Sanchez, CBS 2 News.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. Peace.